Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan, I'm going to cut you off because you know what one of my pet peeves is?
Oh, I thought I was getting cut off. I'm sorry.
Well, usually I say, and my host companion, Sejan Sarowick, and then I let you do like a little bit of banter with me. You know, basics, morning news, program, blah, blah, blah. But I have a pet peeve, and that's how we're starting this episode.
Okay.
Do you have any guess what this pet peeve might be? I mean, we've known each other for 15 years. My guess is you have many that you could cite. But what do you think is grinding my gears right now?
Let's see. At this very instant, could it be... Well, see, now I know what you want to talk about today, and all I can think is, are you trying to lead me into a talking point?
Think about the thing that I assaulted your senses with immediately before we recorded.
The mouth sounds on podcasts or no sounds on podcasts?
No, a little bit earlier than that, like maybe 10 seconds before that. 2 I'm readies before we started.
Somebody scream singing the Who into your ear? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the Who. Specifically, it's a song by the Who. That is the theme song to CSI New York.
That one?
No, that's Miami.
Oh.
New York is actually Baba O'Reilly, which a lot of people, they don't know that that's the name of the song.
Yeah, they call it Teenage Wasteland, right? Or something like that.
And my pet peeve is when these young up-and-coming bands, young is a relative term. I have no idea how old the band that came up in my Discover Weekly on Spotify actually is, but they covered Baba O'Reilly, and they titled it Teenage Wasteland. And that gets me so upset.
I feel like we've had this conversation before, and I've come back to the same thing. It all went out the fucking window for me when Napster became a thing, man. Because from that point on, you could not trust song names, or it became kind of that thing where you just call it whatever. To the point where now bands will name a song something obscure and artsy, and then in parentheses will put the name that they know everybody's going to call it. Like they call their shot beforehand.
Right, and I like that. I actually really dig that. I also like when it's subverted and they name the song what everybody's going to call it, and then in parentheses, the like bonkers title they actually wanted to give it.
Oh, that's just pretentious.
Personal citation was The Bare Naked Ladies and It's Only Me, open parentheses, The Wizard of Magic Land, close parentheses.
Magic Land.
Because they never say that during that, but that's what they wanted to call it. Much like the Who called it Baba O'Reilly. But it grinds my gears, because I think of a conversation that we had outside of the radio station at Coventry High School about Journey and their song Downtown Train.
Downtown Train?
She took, or Midnight Train.
Midnight Train to Georgia?
No. You know, just to sing Small Town Girl. She took
Jack
a Midnight Train.
Right?
Yeah, Jack and Diane, exactly. No, it's that Jessica Simpson song that samples Jack and Diane. I don't remember the name of that one. But yeah, like they were convinced, the people I was with, that the name of that song was Midnight Train. And I'm like, no, it's called Don't Stop Believin'.
Don't Stop Believing. I mean, that's... Yeah, and that was unforgivable at the time because of Glee.
Well, Glee didn't happen while we were in high school. Please don't underage us. We are not comic book characters. We unfortunately age in real time. You're not wrong. If we were Spider-Man, Glee would happen even though we were 15 in the 60s. I feel so bad for Peter Parker. He can never be an adult.
Oh man!
But yeah, it's what it happened was that film Monster with Charlize Theron.
Right.
They played Don't Stop Believing in it, and these people that I spent my time with in high school, they went to see that movie over the weekend. I was not part of this, and what they took away from the
fun times
adaptation of Eileen Wotress's story was that they used Midnight Train by Journey in the movie. And I'm like, you mean Don't Stop Believing? They're like, no, it's called Midnight Train.
They must have been confusing it with Midnight Train to Georgia, right? Like that's the like title wise. I'm not saying
No,
like,
I think it's
song-wise.
because the song opens up with small town girl living in a lonely world. She took a midnight train going anywhere.
Right. But I mean, like subconsciously, this is the only way this makes sense to me. Is they knew there was a song out there with the title "Midnight Train" like being predominant in it, and then they heard that and they assumed this must be that song. Like that has to be the math.
I really
Because
like.
other than that, how do you listen to that song and not pick up on the fact that it's that first of all, that is a lyric in the middle of a sentence in the middle of a verse. Very rarely do songs get named after that, especially Journey songs. Like,
I don't know. The other fight that happened once I proved to them that it was called Don't Stop Believing was someone was convinced, like willing to go to the mattresses over the fact that she took a midnight train going everywhere.
anywhere.
It's anywhere. There's
She's
no
trying to run away. She's trying to get away. She doesn't care where. She just needs to go somewhere, anywhere.
because she's living in a lonely world. She took a midnight train going anywhere. Not everywhere. She wasn't, like, jet-setting around the world.
Or, like, you know, dispersing herself throughout time and space like the fucking Doctor. Like,
Very different song if she took a midnight train going everywhere.
yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing that I think of, and that's what I always think of. And I also think of Smells Like Teen Spirit, and that being a song that, like, I always wanted to hear, and then I would hear what is Smells Like Teen Spirit and be like, oh, I missed it. It's like, no, you didn't. It's just called that, and then it's like nothing about that. You idiot. But it was the thing that they did. But again, seeing again today, and it's also bad about. We're not in the greatest place right now in the world, right? And we're gonna talk about that. Yeah. So what I did to like salve myself to make myself feel better was to watch the first. That was bad.
Say that phrase ever again.
Okay, what I used to make myself feel better was I rewatched the first season of Joe Pera Talks with You. And
nice.
If you haven't seen Joe Pera read you the morning announcements at church, you're missing out on one of the greatest 11 minutes of television created in the last 2 years.
Joe Pera Talks with You is up on HBO Max, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
It is, yeah.
Is this part of that, or is this like a?
Oh yeah, no, it's
thing?
definitely part of it. It's episode 6 of season 1.
Oh, okay.
Watch it. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Gather the whole family together and watch it. And just, you'll be amazed. But it just got the thought of Baba O'Reilly into my mind and how that's the name of the song, even though they don't say it at all and they say Teenage Wasteland like a bunch of times.
Well, and then you could be like the fucking Beatles and you name something Eleanor Rigby and then you say Eleanor Rigby in like 6 other songs on the fucking record.
Well, it's a story, Sejin.
It's a story album. Yeah. No, I am 100% convinced we've had this conversation before, and I want to stop boring people with the same.
I mean, yeah, we more than likely have, but it's just one of those things that right now grinding my gears, and I finally figured out how I want to combat it today. But we'll leave that for more fun times later when I release it on the world and the population. How I plan to combat that. I'm excited. So now we get to the episode proper, right? We've had the 10 minutes of Devin Decker ranting and raving and being a crazy person, perhaps reiterating stories that you've already heard. And now we get to the good part, right? Right?
I look, when I tell you that I am shaking in my boots with excitement to have this conversation that we're about to have today, like, if you had asked me 24 hours ago, like, what are you guys going to talk about on the show? And I would do my usual, like, you know, stuff. I talked last week about how I want to talk about some books. Still want to do that. But other than that, nothing comes to mind. And then 12 hours ago, I was in bed thinking, I can't wait to talk to Devin about this.
Good. I'm glad. So I don't want to take away. You get to announce it. You have the floor, Mr. Sejan, since I cut you off earlier.
Thanks. So we live in a time, Devin, an exciting time where, and I cannot believe that I never thought about this before, and this is now a thing. We live in a time in which we might actually get to see a Sandlerverse.
we live in a time where there already was a Sandlerverse. And I think that's the part of the Sandlerverse that blows my mind, is that everybody's acting like it's a new thing.
Right. The idea of him having continuing characters and related characters. I mean, the O'Doyles have been in how many of his movies?
So many times the O'Doyles have been shouted out.
Right. So it's not a new idea. And I think that's the beauty of this. So this week, we had the pleasure of, I think it actually came out, Friday, like a week ago Friday?
Yeah, it came out, I believe, the 7th of October.
We had the pleasure of being introduced to Adam Sandler's newest artistic creation, a character that, as far as I'm concerned, will go down as one of his best. We got introduced to Hubie Dubois.
Hubie Dubois.
Hubie Dubois, not to be confused with Bobby Dufresne.
And not to be confused with Whitey Duvall.
Oh, man. But we got to meet Hubie Dubois in Hubie's Halloween. And I cannot express to you the joy that it brought me. Not just that the movie is in itself enjoyable, and we'll talk about that, because there's caveats in it, as there always will be with these things. But not only is it enjoyable, but it brought me joy thinking I'm gonna get to watch this again next Halloween. Like, it instantly became that idea of, oh, this is something I could do every Halloween. This is something I could do on a holiday basis. Much like I felt the first time I ever saw 8 Crazy Nights. And I thought, oh, I cannot wait to do this. Like every Christmas or two, I'm definitely going to pop this in. And I have. And I find myself finding that same joy every year, right?
I can't wait to watch this movie for 8 nights in a row every Hanukkah.
Every Hanukkah. It is a blast, man. It is real fun.
It is real fun. I will say that. Everybody on screen is having fun. But before we get to Hubie Halloween proper, because I do really want to discuss it, I'd like to revisit the idea of the Sandlerverse.
Yeah. So one of the big things that this did for everybody, why everybody's talking about it and why we should talk about it today, is it has brought in some faces and some characters and some thoughts and ideas that, as Devin pointed out, have always kind of been bubbling in the background. And this is Adam Sandler and his company and his people just going like full whole hog into this idea of just like, yep, nope, this is a world unto itself where anything can happen. So, but yes, the Sandlerverse.
Well, the reason why I address it is, I remember when a film came out, God, almost 20 years ago at this point, Little Nicky, I think came out in 1998, so more than 20 years, right? Jesus. And that film, the review in the Providence Journal that got my parents to say, you can go see this one alone, we're not going to go with you. All it talked about was that Little Nicky...
boobs on his head?
What? No.
No.
Imagine if that was it. Kevin Nealon has boobs on his head. 1 star.
1 star.
What it talked about was that Little Nicky is a greatest hits of everything that Adam Sandler has done before.
We're talking about 20 years ago, and I bet it was probably Halloween time around 20 years ago, 2000, just to make sure that we get that date right.
Okay, yeah.
We are talking about the year 2000, so this can fit very nicely into our 20 years retrospective.
Into our 20-year retrospective, talking about Little Nicky.
2020, the theme of this year for us.
Popeye's chicken is fucking awesome. Apologies. And 5 years ago, Pixel. What?
Yeah, right. Who played the dog?
Adam Sandler.
Adam Sandler played
Adam
his own
Sandler
dog
did the voice of the dog. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I put on an Adam Sandler voice to voice the dog, so.
Yeah, it introduced us to his puppy, which is his actual dog in real life.
Which is his name in real life.
What's Meatball? That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, it always got a real. I don't know why, but that kind of warmed my heart a little bit. It's a movie that definitely plays on basically Adam Sandler tropes.
Not even just Adam Sandler tropes. Rob Schneider reprises his role of the "you can do it" guy.
Yeah, right.
From
Waterboy.
From Waterboy, and Chubbs shows up in heaven. So, you want to talk about a Sandlerverse? Little Nicky established it. Little Nicky said, all of these movies exist in a similar timeline because I'd really like to bring back Carl Weathers as Chubbs. And you know what? What's Rob Schneider doing? Deuce Bigelow? Get over here, Rob. Say you can do it.
Yeah. So, man, there's like a million different ways I want to go with this. I was so happy we got to talk about this. So there's this thing that you have to like kind of admit with Adam Sandler, right? Is the idea that the dude, and I think Funny People actually does a phenomenal job of capturing like him and like what it is like to kind of be him in a Hollywood space, is like there's this idea that he knows he has hit a point where he has more money than God, right? And the idea is that like he basically can do whatever he wants, and so because of that, his successes and failures are completely on him. And I think that is something that he is very aware of. You could say the same about somebody like a Brad Pitt or a George Clooney, right? But they don't wear themselves on their sleeves nearly as much as Adam Sandler does. They see that they see that opportunity to basically do whatever they want, and they take it as a sense of like responsibility to the craft of movie making, acting, whatever you want to say, to like do something that is gonna like hit people in a certain way, right? Adam Sandler has taken that and he has made the decision that he is going to just take care of those that he loves and just do what he did, like do what is fun to him until people stop giving him money to do that. And here's the thing, at this point they never will, right? So like he's not, people take his movies to a point, like they take them in to a point where they are like offended that Adam Sandler gets to do these kinds of things, right? And I can't do that. Like, I cannot blame the guy. Like, that's what I mean, is that's the thing you have to kind of admit to yourself, is like Adam Sandler is just a dude that has the money to do what he wants, and he's doing it. And like, you can't fault him for
No,
it,
you
right?
can't, because the reason why they hate him, because they ain't him. Let's just be a jerk there. Like there's that trope of, oh, that's only because they're jealous of you. They're jealous of what you get to do. And that really just sounds like placation on the part of the mom who has the kid who's getting made fun of. But
Right.
in Adam Sandler's case, the reason why people cajole him for what he is currently doing is because they know that they will never be able to do that.
And the thing is that I really appreciate, and the reason why I am never going to hate on a movie just because Sandler's doing it. Now, that doesn't mean he's not made movies that I hate. There have been some movies he's touched, and we can talk about it if we want. But like, the reason I will never blame him is that he has shown time and time again that he is very aware of that. Like, Funny People being the thing that just fucking hits it on the nose, right? But I mean, any character that he touches, he brings that kind of self-awareness to. He never makes himself the superhero without like him also being the butt of the joke. I mean, literally look at the Zohan, right? Like that character is that idea that he is this guy that can do no wrong, but also is, you know, he's the butt of every joke in that movie, right? So like there is this sense in which he realizes that he is the Superman of his universe, but he's not putting himself on a pedestal in his universe. You know what I mean? And like, I cannot tell you how much I respect and appreciate that. And that goes all the way back to whatever you want to consider to be the start of the Sandlerverse. For most people, I guess it would be Billy Madison, right?
Yeah, I think it'd have to be Billy Madison. I mean, because before that, it's Going Overboard, and that really doesn't. Or I think it's Going Overboard, right?
Well, so you have Overboard as his first kind of him leading movie.
Is it Overboard or is it Going Overboard? Because Overboard is where Goldie Hawn and what's his name? I think it's Going Overboard.
It's Going Overboard. I just keep But so Going Overboard is kind of the first like Sandler-led comedy, and I say kind of the first. I mean, it's like his first full-fledged movie, right? Mm-hmm. But so whether or not you want to count that, I think there's an academic debate to be had there. After that, he does some things like he shows up in Coneheads, he shows up in Airheads, he shows up in.
He loves head movies.
I mean, like he shows up in like a side character in fucking Shakes the Clown. He has a phenomenal role in Mixed Nuts. He plays the dude with the ukulele the whole time, and I really like
his first actual role is Mixed Nuts.
But, well, I mean, besides Going Overboard and things like that.
No, I'm pretty sure Mixed Nuts is his first movie appearance. I might be wrong on that, but I'm like, I've had enough discussions with people that I think that that's the first time he showed up in a movie. He was also a friend of like Theo's in the Cosby Show.
Airheads is the same year.
Okay.
Coneheads is the year before. And Going Overboard is at 1989. So it's
really
about 5
Mixed Nuts is that late?
Yeah, Mixed Nuts is 94.
I'm an idiot. Jesus, I thought that came out in the 80s.
And then so it's only the next year that we get Billy Madison.
Right. And Billy Madison, if we're going to have an academic discussion about the Sandlerverse, which is what this episode is, let's just be honest. Let's not even mix nuts about it. Billy Madison starts the Sandlerverse. It's the first time you hear O'Doyle rules.
I think yeah, I know. Oh man. So I think the big reason why I am going to say that for our purposes it starts at Billy Madison is that's also his last season on SNL. Billy Madison comes out, and that is the point at which he is then allowed to become the Adam Sandler that we all like know and love. Because people remember that he was on SNL, but I couldn't name a character that he played. I don't know many people that Opera Man. That's a nice pull. Yes. Yep.
That's it. I have Opera Man, and I have the like ditzy girl where it was him, David Spade, and Chris Farley dressed as girls in a mall food court.
He would do a lot of Bruce Springsteen impressions. I think that was one of the big things that he would.
I mean, his biggest contribution from Saturday Night Live, his biggest contributions, there's two, is Lunch Lady Land and the Hanukkah song. Performing those two as a cast member are big. And Opera Man. Like, Opera Man is the only one that jumped to mind.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's when it takes off. And, you know, and like within a year we have Happy Gilmore. So, and like, there's other movies that then come out of his career that are definitely not part of the Sandlerverse. Like, I don't think you could call Bulletproof part of it.
No, right? I would love it if it was, but Bulletproof. All right, so if we are we're going to use the Ben Stiller, which is hella appropriate considering it's what kind of opens up the discussion of a Sandlerverse in 2020 is a Ben Stiller character. Ben Stiller, I have often said this, is three things. He is the overwhelmed everyman, he is Tony Perkins from Heavyweights, and he is Derek Zoolander.
Right.
And Adam Sandler has those same three pillars.
I will say that before we get into what those pillars are, because I want to get this out first, I think with Sandler more than Stiller, and part of this is because he lives for these kinds of movies, whereas like Stiller will do them every so often. I think Adam Sandler is more of a sliding scale. Like, I think that you could make a sliding scale of his characters with the same idea. But whereas like Ben Stiller plays those three characters and you're going to always get one of those three characters in his comedies, I think with Sandler, you get a little bit of like it moves between them in a way that Stiller doesn't. But go ahead. What do you consider to be the three pillars?
I mean, I don't know if I guess if I had to look at first of all, Adam Sandler can have three pillars, but he has three lanes. And I think that's the easier way to define Adam Sandler. And that is exactly where we come from a sliding scale. Because sometimes the only thing in the middle of the road is not yellow lines and armadillos. It is Adam Sandler doing an action comedy or doing a comedy drama.
So I'll tell you what I think my sliding scale is, the beginning and end of it. Is I think you start with like something like a Little Nicky. I think that is definitely like the most character-y he gets, to the point where he is literally like wearing a costume the entire time, all the way to Big Daddy, where he is kind of just this everyman New Yorker who just happens to have like a quick wit about him, right? And I think it is somewhere between Little Nicky to what's his character's name? Big Daddy. It's gonna kill me because I love that movie.
I don't know at all. I'm very upset about that.
It's Sonny. It's Sonny Koufax, right? Yeah. Because so I think anywhere between Sonny and Nicky, I think, is where you find him kind of finding his other characters, and like middle of the road for that is like a Billy Madison. So it's a very kind of character-y person, but it's also a very human one. Like you know people that are kind of that dimwit, right? Like maybe Happy might be a little bit more of a better center, but like. He's constantly
Happy kind of goes scale. A little. That's a weird scale. I really like those as the two extremes, a Nicky to a Sonny. That doesn't bother me. But then that scale, for me, represents the Derek Zoolander lane of the Ben Stiller, because Adam Sandler also has this serious dude, and that serious dude does not fit into that sliding scale.
Well, so I think that what I'm talking about is specifically for the Sandlerverse.
Yes.
Anything that you would consider to be a Sandlerverse film. And I don't know if there's a serious dude in the Sandlerverse.
Well, I agree with that. But that's the problem, is that, like, before we can define a Sandlerverse, I think we need to define the films that exist outside of it.
So this is a sliding scale sitting upon a pillar.
Yes.
Essentially, okay.
This pillar is a slide. It's a slide pillar. And then there are other pillars that exist, and that is, so you have the slide pillar.
Grown-ups too that we all know and love.
Oh God. But yeah, there's that slide pillar, which is important, but then there's also action movie Adam Sandler and serious movie Adam Sandler, because Punch Drunk Love, I don't care who you are, does not fit into the Sandlerverse.
No,
I can't, even though I could, like, find a place for that character on the scale that you just defined, I don't think that Punch Drunk Love can fit into the Sandlerverse. Ditto Uncut Gems, which is the one that is not, I don't have any problems saying that, but a lot of these articles that I've been seeing about the Sandlerverse include his character from Uncut Gems.
That's
in
ridiculous.
Like, what?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, like it's like the picture is Hubie Halloween, something in the middle, probably something like Happy Gilmore or Billy Madison, and then his character from Uncut Gems, and I'm like, that doesn't fit. That is not part of a Sandlerverse. I get that it was his recent theatrical released film, but that's a different Adam Sandler.
I almost would even argue that I don't think that, like, anger management fits into this. It does. Like, I would not begrudge anybody considering that part of the Sandlerverse, but, like, what I consider to be a Sandlerverse film specifically has, like, some qualifiers to it that anger management doesn't quite fit.
Well, I don't think that Airheads would be one, even though the character
Airheads is definitely not.
Yeah,
no,
even though that character could fit into that sliding scale, that's more of the action Sandler that we also see in something like Bulletproof.
Right.
Which I almost called Bullet Point, and I'm really glad I didn't say that. But
like, yeah, like you have some dudes like who does he play in I now pronounce Chuck and Larry. He's Chuck, right? Yeah. So
Chuck.
You have right. So you have Chuck, right? And you have guys like, even his character from The Longest Yard isn't much of a character, right? Like he's doing his thing, whereas other people around him are being much more characters, all the way down to something like a Little Nicky or even Hubie. Like let's put Hubie on the list, like or Bobby Dufresne, right? Like you have these
Boucher.
That's right. Okay.
Bobby
the entire
Dufresne
time I was watching
is
Hubie
like
last night, the entire time I was watching Hubie last night, I was like, if you're gonna go to Dubois, why not go to Dufresne? It's because Dufresne wasn't the thing. Andy Dufresne.
Andy Dufresne is Shawshank Redemption, which is what I'm laughing and joking about right now. What was the
connective tissue there? And that's what it is. People kept saying Hubie Dubois, and I kept thinking Andy Dufresne. Yeah, all right, I got
Bobby
there.
Boucher. I mean, Hubie Halloween, Hubie Dubois, is so close in DNA to Bobby Boucher. It was hard to it was weird seeing June Squibb instead of Kathy Bates.
Yes, definitely.
And also, it was also, like, we're not talking Hubie Halloween yet, but I'm going to put on record a detriment to the film that it wasn't Kathy Bates. I'm just going to say that.
I love June Squibb, but
I love June Squibb too. But
it's a shame that they couldn't get Kathy Bates, considering the relationship between the two of them already and what else is going on in Hubie, for sure.
Yeah.
I can agree to that. Yeah, man. So like Sandlerverse films for me, like, and the reason why I think like this is a good time to talk about like why anger management doesn't fit into it for me is like, not only do you have Adam Sandler at the center of it as like this everyman, there has to be a female lead that he is striving for in a way that is she's always going to be out of his league. That is just, and that's comedy 101. Like he almost takes like a lot of the sitcom-y tropes that you love from your favorite sitcom and blows them up to the big screen, which is why I think dudes like Kevin James do so well in his movies. So like you need to have the love interest that is clearly out of his league, but that he's going for. There needs to be some fantastical element. There needs to be some type of magical realism to it. And this is where anger management falls apart for me, is that like you could kind of argue like Jack Nicholson's character has that kind of magical realism in some ways, in the ways in which he's able to kind of get everybody in on the bit, but that's not enough for me. Whereas like something like Jack and Jill, like the him playing the two characters, that is more than enough magical realism for me to deal with. Like the weird shit that goes on between the two of them on screen in moments is like, all right.
Al Pacino being addicted to Dunkin' Donuts coffee is all the magical realism I need for Jack and Jill.
There's some weirdness that goes on in those, right?
That's an interesting thing that you bring up. I don't mean to cut you off, but where do you put Click? Do you put Click in the Sandlerverse? Because I don't think I could.
I think I put Click. I think I do put Click in the Sandlerverse, and I think I put it closer towards the more realistic end of his movies. Oddly, considering the thing that movie is all about, but I think for like the character that he plays, it's more towards the realistic end. But if you had Christopher Walken's character show up in a different Adam Sandler movie and have him do something ridiculous to him, like turn him into a dog or something like that.
So not Nine Lives. Literally, all I'm thinking of is that Christopher Walken, in my head, in my canon, plays the same character in Click and Nine Lives. And he turns Kevin Spacey into a cat, not Adam Sandler into a dog.
Is that just a Sandlerverse movie that we just doesn't have Adam Sandler in it?
Doesn't have Adam Sandler in it. It's very strange, but that's one of those things that I often like. I saw that movie and I'm like, Christopher Walken is clearly the same character that he was in Bed Bath & Beyond, end up in Click. But then because of that offshoot to another thing, and also the magical realism that we're discussing that needs to be present in these films in order for them to be a Sandlerverse contender, I feel like the magic is too strong in something like Click. Whereas another example, Bedtime Stories, like that magical realism because he's just telling stories, but it still sort of brings you into it. Like, I can fit that one into the Sandlerverse far easier than something like Click.
Yeah, because maybe Click doesn't fit. Maybe Click is not one of the ones that we pull into this, right? But
are we doing it? Are we in charge of it? Did I miss an email from Hollywood? Because I would love to do it.
Nobody else has done it yet. Like you and the people that have attempted have failed miserably by including uncut gems. Let's do this. Yeah.
All right. So.
Continue. Something like so the magic thing that you're talking about in Bedtime Story is super magical, right? Whereas like something like Billy Madison, it's just the understanding that he is so rich that he gets away with buying his way into third grade, right? Like that's the weird thing there, right?
Is it weird? What I like about Billy Madison is that everybody calls him out every step of the way. Mm-hmm. That like, oh, so you just have a rich father, so that's why you get to do this. You have Bradley Whitford's character, who is incredible. I wish I could remember that character's name, but honestly, he is calling out like, this is stupid. What does this prove? I should take over this company. Well, the whole movie.
I think another one that's kind of interesting to talk about whether or not it fits in is something like The Wedding Singer, right?
I think The Wedding Singer fits. I don't really have an issue with The Wedding Singer. It's sort of like the Captain America of the Sandlerverse. Nice. Because, but if we're having that discussion, like I'm way out of order, does the Drew Barrymore trilogy fit? In which
50
case,
First Dates definitely does, because you're talking about like the weird, like that. This is the magic of this one, right? Is the memory thing where he is working with that, and it's interesting because it's not something that's focused around him, which I think is one of the first times that we kind of see that. And then later you see something like Spanglish, which I don't think fits into the verse, but like you see him kind of grow from that into other more well-respected movies. Yeah, and then the last one is the mixed family one. What's that one called?
Blended.
I think Blended fits.
Blended totally fits because Nescabar Lop is there from My Name is Earl. I know he has a real name, but he'll never not be Nescabar Lop for me, and I feel awful about that. But like, he's also in Grandma's Boy and that's where he becomes friends with Adam Sandler to show up in all these movies. He's fantastic.
So that's the other question is, does something like Grandma's Boy fit into it where Adam Sandler is not like a lead?
Yeah. Is it the Happy Madison universe or is it just the Sandlerverse? Does Adam Sandler need to be there? That's a very interesting question that I was completely prepared for, but now also a little thrown off. Also, the main thought that I had in discussing a Sandlerverse, which is what Hubie Halloween did, is what villains would come together to form the Legion of Doom that Adam Sandler would have to fight against. Bradley Whitford, I think, would be the one who puts together the League of Evil X's.
Yeah, were you the one that was talking to me about how you felt like he would be the leader of the group and he would bring in people like Shooter McGavin and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then there'd be like people that he brings in. And he's like, no, you don't...
Gordon, by the way, just Eric, so that we get the name down.
Yeah. Yeah, and like he'd bring in other people, and I think there would be that question of like, no, you don't belong here. Like, you're not evil. He hasn't really hurt you the way that he hurt us. Like, it would be a really good movie to bring it together. I also think that it would be funny if Little Nicky's brothers somehow were involved in it, but also still taking their orders from Eric Gordon.
Yeah, yes. Phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a fun thing. So, I mean, every movie that has a double V heroine, I think, is automatic Sandlerverse.
Just automatically in? Yeah,
I think that's automatically it. So that is Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, Little Nicky, The Waterboy, Hubie Halloween, and one more. I can't remember the last one that has a double V character.
Oh, man.
If you go to the trivia for Hubie Halloween, it says them all. But it's Vicky Valancourt from The Waterboy, Vivian, I can't remember her last name, from that. But if you look it up, I mean, Julie Bowen plays the one in Happy Gilmore, but there's one other one that has a double V female lead.
Veronica Vaughn, Virginia Vent, Vicky Valancourt, and Valerie Varon. So
this is only the fifth one, so I'm not forgetting
This is
one.
the fifth one.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the fifth one.
So, so that right there, very easy for me to call the Sandlerverse. If we're just starting off, those 5 movies form the Sandlerverse. And for the very reason of the fact that we've already seen crossover in those films. There are already characters that cross over in those movies.
Yes, and so we got the delightful crossover in Hubie of from Happy Gilmore with Ben Stiller, which is I think the thing that really kind of set this all off for a lot of people, right? Yeah. I feel like Hubie Halloween might be the Sandler movie that kind of brought people back to the Sandler movies. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people that have been watching it in my sphere and talking about it are the kind of people that, like, I remember growing up and them being like, yeah, Happy Gilmore, yeah, the Billy Madison, like, yeah, the Adam Sandler movie's great, and then like kind of, you know, lost interest like a lot of people did, and after like Little Nicky, like you saw like a drop off in certain people that were like, yeah, I'm done with Adam Sandler for a while, and I feel like Hubie Halloween is the first time that those people then kind of were like, you know what, yeah, I could do with a new like Sandler movie. Also, it's Halloween, and I think that is going to be a key to us talking about Hubie in a second, is that it is a holiday movie through and through, which means that it gets a pass in a lot of ways. But I'm very interested in like what other characters have like shown up, right? Like, because the O'Doyles, as we mentioned, right? We had Hal. Who else has kind of shown up in other stuff?
So, I mean, it really is the You Can Do It guy going from Waterboy to Little Nicky. It's Chubbs going from Happy Gilmore to Little Nicky. I can't really think of any major ones like that. I mean, Hubie feels like Bobby Boucher to me in so many ways that, like, it really was distracting to see June Squibb. Like, I'm not afraid to say it, but I mean, I'm ready to talk about Hubie Halloween and then maybe tie it back into this.
Yeah, no, for sure. Can I tell you one of the big things that really surprised me with Hubie?
What's that?
I cannot believe this is Kenan Thompson's first time in a Sandler movie.
I can't either. That was one of the craziest things that I read. I'm not...
Kenan Thompson showed up as the cop and, like, not playing a character in any way, just, like, doing his fucking thing. And I loved it. It was great. It was like watching fucking Kenan and Kel again, where he was the straight man. Like...
I mean, it's honestly, it is him reaching in and bringing in more SNL alum, which seems to be, like, SNL... for all of its various faults, which we could talk about, but we don't need to talk about right now, he is using that as a growth chamber to find people to be in his films.
Well, and what's his name there? Lorne Michaels is more than happy to do that for him, because like, you got to remember that most SNL produced movies, most Lorne Michael produced movies kind of fell on their faces, you know, like everything from Stuart Saves the World to
It's Pat.
It's Pat had its own movie. I forgot about that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so like you had like Coneheads. Coneheads did really well, and then you had like Adam Sandler, and like without Adam Sandler, you wouldn't really have had Chris Farley, right? Specifically Billy Madison. You have Chris Farley playing the bus driver in that, and then it's a few years later that he starts doing his thing, right? And David Spade joins Chris Farley, right? And then you see David Spade get brought into the Sandler movies, and like he has this really weird like level of success doing those kinds of movies. David Spade does, and then he doesn't quite succeed when he goes off on his own sometimes. So Lorne Michaels realizes that there's like a secret sauce to Sandler, and rather than try and recreate it over and over and over again, he's more than happy to let Sandler come in and just do it again.
Right, but also I don't know if Lorne Michaels is involved in any way, shape, or form. I feel
Not
like,
anymore.
Yeah,
but like starting back in the day, like back in the '90s, Lorne Michaels was definitely involved, and then like from that, Sandler garners this ability, this reputation to walk basically into the fucking green room of SNL and be like, "Hey, I got a movie. Here's some scripts." Throws them on the table and is like, "Have at it." Like, and he gets to do that now because of his connection with Lorne Michaels in the '90s.
agreed. Very much agreed. And also, but I also feel like he's sort of a landing pad for people after they're done with SNL. Like Kenan Thompson, obviously, I don't know. I think he's about ready to leave. I feel like I read an article like that.
The dude has been there longer than anybody in history.
Cast member,
and
yeah.
like on the one hand, the dude's been doing this shit his whole life, everything all the way back to All That. So
Right.
like maybe not. I could see Kenan doing this till he dies. On the other hand, I wouldn't blame the dude for wanting to take a fucking
Right. I
break.
feel like I read an article that said that he was considering it, and it makes sense seeing him show up in an Adam Sandler film that like that's going to be his next step.
Also, like looking good. Kenan Thompson looking fucking good.
Yeah, okay. We can dissect that a little bit later. No, he does. Yeah, he does. I mean, the fact that he has been working in comedy for as long as he has, you're not wrong. But I'm also talking. Yeah,
working in
that's
comedy,
true.
yeah.
But I'm also talking about like Maya Rudolph showing up in these films. And there's the other growth chamber that Adam Sandler has, which is Disney. Because he is willing to take these Disney kids and give them a life after Disney. Get them away from the machine.
I'm not gonna let you. I'm not gonna get you. No. You can't walk away from Maya Rudolph and not also mention Tim Meadows.
Well, no, but I mean, Tim Meadows has been there for a while.
Right.
It's not like
right.
this is his first
But you want
movie.
to talk about reaching into SNL and like crafting people in a specific way. Like Tim Meadows in a Sandler movie is something special. Like
Yeah, it was. I'm sorry. Maya Rudolph was the one that surprised me, though, even more than Kenan. Like, it surprised me later to learn this is the first time that Kenan has shown up in one. But seeing Maya Rudolph, because she's on board with Feig, and also she's married to P.T. Anderson, which like always kind of blows me away. I was having that discussion with your brother about Paul W.S. Anderson and his Monster Hunter movie, which we cannot talk about because we're already too deep. But oh my god, that Monster Hunter trailer! Oh my god, that Monster Hunter trailer! And like, my thought about Maya Rudolph was the fact that her taking care of Paul Thomas Anderson is what inspired Phantom Thread, and then suddenly she's in fucking Hubie Halloween.
Yeah, but don't forget that one of Adam Sandler's biggest like moves to get out of is Punk Drunk Love, a P.T. Anderson film.
Yeah,
and like and like the two of them, by all accounts, like made magic together with that movie. They both had a lot to say about the experiences on that film working with one another, and a lot of people outside of that movie applauded the what they did. So like, it's actually not that weird of a leap. Not only does she have the SNL connection, but also like her husband and Adam Sandler have some history, which is interesting.
Right, but I just wasn't thinking of her as someone who could show up in an Adam Sandler movie the same way that like, oh, Ray Liotta, that makes sense to me. That doesn't bother me. Oh, 3 of the kids from Jesse, and it would have been 4. R.I.P. Cameron Boyce. Like,
I know, man.
Like,
heartbreaking.
like, but it's like, oh my god, and we just talked about Jesse in regards to that Spider-Man episode, but like, those all make sense. Even Julie Bowen, because she was in Happy Gilmore, and of course she's just looking for a nice, easy payday hanging out with good people after finishing Modern Family.
Right.
Like, everyone else makes sense, but Maya Rudolph stuck out like a sore thumb to me. to the fact that I have seen nothing but articles about how Adam Sandler got Steve Buscemi to be in this movie, how Adam Sandler got Kevin James to be in Hubie Halloween. And I'm like, I want to see how Adam Sandler got Maya Rudolph to be in Hubie Halloween. But you know what? We just solved it. It's Punch Drunk Love. That's the Kevin Bacon connection right here.
Yeah, not that like she needs her husband in order to find work. Believe me, she's fucking phenomenal on her own. But that's exactly the point, right? Is like, what does she need a Sandler movie for?
Right, exactly. That's one of those things. The work that she's doing is great. I mean, Maya Rudolph, hell of an actress. I love her work, but just like seeing her, it was like, oh damn! Like that one surprised me. I'm not surprised to see Steve Buscemi. They met working on Airheads, and he's been in almost every Adam Sandler movie since.
They're literally like best friends. Yeah. I the other one that surprised me, not too much because he's been in at least one other one that I know of, but I was just surprised to see him show up again, was Michael Chiklis.
Yeah, that's true. And Michael Chiklis, the only ones that he showed up with are Netflix ones.
Right. Yeah.
Like he's part of the Netflix revolution of Adam Sandler, which is a whole other thing to discuss. Is this like life-altering deal that Adam Sandler made with Netflix?
Well, and in a weird way, it almost feels like the move to Netflix gave him the ability to kind of tweak his formula. I won't say he changed it, but he is definitely not. This is the first real character movie he's made, besides like, I guess, Ridiculous Six. But like, if you look at Murder Mystery, if you look at The Do-Over, he's not. I mean, and what's the really kind of almost serious dramedy that he did? The Cobbler. I forgot about that, but that wasn't even what I was talking about. Sandy Wexler?
Oh yeah, Sandy Wexler, that documentary one. I forget about that movie.
Right. With like these are the movies that he's made with Netflix, and it's allowed him to kind of relax, I think, in a weird way on some of the dumber stuff. Like Little Nicky, these movies are not. Like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like the closest we get to that is Ridiculous Six, and it ends up not working well for him. So he actually kind of dials back on kind of some of the dumb. This is him kind of now going back in the other direction and adding a little bit more of the dumb back in, right? It's very, very interesting what the Netflix era of the Sandlerverse has been. Yeah.
And it's a big part of it. Let's talk about Hubie Halloween. Like, we've talked about the Sandlerverse for a long time. I have thoughts on this movie that I'd like to share with you.
I think I already said it before, I think it's a great Halloween, like, fun time, like, Hollow watching movie. And in that, flaws included, because I don't think that if this movie had come out in August and wasn't based in Halloween, why wouldn't it be? But like I don't think it would have worked for as many people. I think I still would have kind of enjoyed myself, but not nearly as much. But I think you would not have had the audience that this movie has been getting, because as you mentioned, going on 3 weeks ago at this point, right, that it's been in the top 10 since it premiered. Like, it hasn't dropped out.
I mean, Bly Manor overtook it, but Hubie Halloween was number 2. And Bly Manor, a lot of people are disappointed about Bly Manor. I don't know if you've had any conversations with anybody.
I'll tell
not
you this,
as good
I
as Hill
started
House.
it and don't see myself finishing it. I don't begrudge anybody that likes it. I'm not going to sit here and talk about it as like it being like a shambles. It's definitely watchable TV. It's just not something I have the time or care to dedicate to the rest of it.
I don't know anybody who you could begrudge for liking it, because literally every conversation I've had has been, I'm a little disappointed because I'm only watching because I liked the other one so much.
Yeah.
So and again, if you do out there and you like it, please get in touch with us. Let us know why. I'd like to have that discussion. We're at the Say Report on Twitter, but it's just one of those things where every report of that is that they weren't able to have lightning strike twice. Yeah. And you feel bad for a show like that. I didn't even expect that to be your reaction. I didn't know you had started it. I'm completely blind on it. I don't know these shows. I don't watch horror TV shows.
It's got a real creep factor to it, which is great. And again, maybe this season, like, this is the time to watch it. Whereas like Haunting of Hill House, because that is the other one in this, right? If I'm not mistaken. Right. So Haunting of Hill House is one of those ones where in April, if I get an itch, I could sit down and watch that again. Whereas this, maybe this time of year, maybe again next year, I'll give it another try when there isn't a Hubie Halloween for me to fall back on. Like maybe I'll try it again, but I don't know. But yeah, so Hubie Halloween falls into this really beautiful category for me as like a really good holiday movie. So that means that it gets a pass on things where like sometimes the story doesn't add up. Sometimes events will will occur that are really unexplained. And when I say unexplained, not like ooh creepy. I mean like there's no reason for like the ways in which people fly through the air in this movie when they get attacked, knowing the end of this movie, unless, and I have it unless, but we should talk about the rest of the plot first. But yeah, so like stuff kind of just happens and you just kind of deal with it. Characters show up and are able to kind of act in a way that, as we mentioned, like Adam Sandler is really putting on a character in this one, which he hasn't done much lately for the Netflix stuff. And I think that's okay in this one because this universe, the Sandlerverse, this specific movie universe, though, in Hubie Halloween definitely allows for it, right? His magical coffee thermos is a delight, but again, wouldn't work outside of a context, I think, of a holiday movie for me, right?
Yeah. You know what? Screw it. I'm cutting right and jumping into it. It's something that you mentioned earlier. It's my biggest issue with this film every time I think about it. Julie Bowen is supposed to be the out of his league character, and her weird devotion and like head over heels feelings for him make no sense to me.
I think that it is two things. First of all, it gave me this sense of the whole movie gave me the sense of the old Ernest movies, right? And I think there's one or two Ernest movies that you could point to where they had that exact same thing going on. It's part of the formula for again, specifically like holiday based, like we're just all here to have a good time. There's no drama. So like they literally eliminate drama from the romantic side. You know, from minute one that she is super into him up until the end. There's never a moment where she doubts him. And in fact, it is that love for him that saves the day in the end. It is a huge part of it. The other part of it is I actually think a really smart move, a really smart commentary, I should say, by Sandler and his writers, because like he has been called out for years as part of his formula being the out of your league like love interest, and that being like so huge for him, and to the point where people often would accuse him of like casting women in these roles just so that he could like make out with them. And I think they even address that in like Funny People. I think there's a joke made about it, like and he again is very aware of that. And so I think, first of all, bringing back Julie Bowman to do this, it's not a new person, it is somebody that has worked with him before, so you can say that possibly that means that she enjoyed working with him the first time and is happy to come back, right? On top of that, they go whole hog into that, right? Like that joke of him getting to be with this woman that's out of his league, and like he just fucking owns it. So I think it's one of the few things in this movie that you can point to, and a few things isn't right. I think there's a lot going on in Hubie Halloween where it's not just a Halloween movie. It is also a celebration of Adam Sandler movies, which I think is the other reason that people latched onto it so much as a Sandlerverse kind of like spark, is that it really does kind of celebrate tropes, not just in Halloween and holiday films, but also in Sandler films. So I think that's all this is him just kind of taking that concept that has always been present in his movies and knowing that people are going to call him out on that kind of stuff and actually like making fun of it. I think it's a parody of itself. So it is super over the top, and there's definitely moments where it's almost uncomfortable. The other thing is I also think that part of it is that the mystery of this movie is you're supposed to think, and I did think for a moment, that she might possibly be the mysterious force in this movie. And that only plays if she is behaving the way that she's been behaving the whole time.
Right. Which is, honestly, that's, everybody has said that as the argument to me. And it, oh my God, it still doesn't work for me. And I know that it's me. I know that it's just me that like has this weird hang up with it. But I mean, one of the reasons why is when you're looking at a Bobby Boucher like offshoot character, which is what Hubie Dubois is, then obviously and her name is Vicky Valentine, not Vicky Valentine, something Valentine, and it's Vicky Valancourt in The Waterboy. Like, it almost feels like Hubie Halloween was supposed to be a sequel to The Waterboy, but they couldn't get Kathy Bates, so they made him a different character. Or, like,
maybe.
Like, no. I mean, I don't think that. I think that it's more establishing this, but it's one of those situations. Violet, thank you. But Vicky Valancourt, like, she is one of those, it's kind of cool that she's into him, but like, you never really question it, but she never seems super crazy, even when she holds up a sign like, want me to kill them. Like, so the devotion that Violet has on display, it just made me uncomfortable. and that was the problem for me. I didn't want to be made uncomfortable by that.
Yeah. I felt the entire time, like when it first started, I was like, is this them really kind of leaning into this thing? And then when they get to the mystery part, I was like, oh, that's clearly where this is going. And then like at the end of it, like them ending up together, it rang for me as like one of those things where there's so much other conflict going on that they just remove the romantic conflict completely, and I'm kind of okay with that. Like I'm sort of at a point where like I feel like comedies depend way too much on there's not if a comedy comes out nowadays, there's going to be a romantic angle. It always feels like
Hollywood
like,
relies on the romantic plot more than anything else. Like that's why I love A Few Good Men, because Demi Moore and Tom Cruise do not wind up together. Like that's not necessary. There's enough story here.
One of the ways that you eliminate that, and I think the mature, preferable way, is that we just accept that men and women can exist without having to be romantically involved with each other, a la A Few Good Men, right? Mm-hmm. I think the way that Sandler has chosen to deal with that in this movie is, well, let's just take the mystery out immediately. They're going to end up together. The end. You get it. And so, like, again, it's Sandler. It's one of those moments where you kind of just have to accept that Sandler's just going to do what Sandler want to do, right? And if you can accept that, then it's a much more easy thing to watch. But I could see how it gets really uncomfortable, because there's definitely moments where she's like eyeballing him in weird ways. But again, I don't think you can ignore that. That's kind of the plot significant point in the third act of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, like there's one scene where it doesn't gross me out, and that's what it is. It's the fact that it gets to the squick factor for me, and the scene where it doesn't is when she's talking with the foster kids, which is a whole other kettle of fish. And it's Cookie saying he was at our school today, kids threw food at him. And she's like, no, he's probably the nicest guy that I know. That sounds genuine. That doesn't sound like slobbering, and because of that, I want him to be mine. Like, it just seems like having a conversation about, no, he's this really nice guy who just wants everybody to have fun. And it's yeah.
I also wonder if part of it is that, like, it's the first time we get to see one of his love interests be kind of a character, right? Because usually they're
good point.
like the rest of them are just kind of in his sphere, right? Like you have like the teacher that's just a third grade teacher until he shows up, and then suddenly she's this like sex kitten, right? And like this happens a lot with the females in his movies, is they don't have much going on with them other than like they're usually the first get for the movie, is like, all right, who's going to be his partner in this one, right? And so Drew Barrymore, right? And like, I don't know, like it's really, besides maybe Drew Barrymore in 50 First Dates, and even then she's not playing much of a character. She just has this one particular characteristic about her. It's the first time that you get to see one kind of do what Sandler does with his character. So why does Sandler get to put on a funny voice and act weird, but she doesn't, right? I don't know. Just a thought.
No, you bring up a really good point. It's a step in the right direction to giving the female character agency. And like we've said many, many times before in the past on this show, a step in the right direction is better than nothing at all. I can critique is better than not taking a step at all.
Yeah, that's definitely the way I'd put it, because I would even say that, to your point, I don't even know if it's necessarily the right direction. I just think it's a move.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And, yeah. I mean, and also, secondary complaint about this movie is I don't know why they wind up at Manchester by the Sea for him to confront her, thinking that she's the person. I don't know. I'm like, why the fuck are they in Manchester by the Sea right now? For one
the same reason that the fucking Poirot parlor scene happens at the haunted house for no reason, with like 50% of the characters there being people we only just met 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, wow, this is a trek. Like, I understand that there's that point on 95 where you're either going to go 44 towards Gloucester, or you're going to stay on 95 if you're in Massachusetts. And I'm like, so I know that once I get past Salem, I will be in Manchester by the Sea, but that feels like a trek.
Do you want to? I mean, like my thinking when it came up is immediately like, oh, this is the Hitchcockian spoof moment, where they reveal that the woman that he's been like trying to protect the whole night has actually been the one, the killer the whole time.
The
and
fog
then like
was
twist
gorgeous.
on top of twist.
Yeah.
Right. The twist on top of twist, she's not, right? But like she literally comes out of the mist wearing the trench coat with the collar up, right? And she sidles up to him and whispers all of these like femme fatale like lines to him. Julie Bowen, like, phenomenally cast for this character, specifically for this scene. So like it actually played really well with me, as much as I also had that moment where I was like, this fucking comes out of nowhere, but I was just okay with it because the movie up to that point had been a bunch of stuff just happening.
I'm stealing a boat. Like,
I mean,
and it's one of those things where, like, if I didn't know the area, if I wasn't familiar with the area, I would have never. And because there are people in the house where I'm like, I don't know why that scene took place in Manchester by the Sea, and they're like, what? And I'm like, they didn't know that was the name of the town, for starters, since 1989, that Manchester, Massachusetts changed its legal name to Manchester by the Sea, hyphens between the words. That's a crazy name for a town, right? Yes. I just want the 1 minute to say, like, that's a crazy name for a town.
It's very British. Like, it's like Manchester on the Hill or something.
Oh,
like
I get it. Yeah. It's to differentiate between Manchester, New Hampshire, which is like a stone's throw away from it. I understand all of it. What I don't understand is why the Casey Affleck movie, which is set there, is Manchester by the Sea without the hyphens. There we go with the Devin Decker minute.
There we go.
But yeah, and it's like, and that's the other thing, is that so much in Hubie Halloween just happens, and that was jarring.
Yeah. There's so the movie has like kind of this very, I think, to its benefit, because again, just being a celebration of just Halloween and Sandler stuff coming together, it's very vague in its plot. There is something creepy going on in this town going up to Halloween night. There's this introduction of a possible mental patient escape. There's this weirdness with a neighbor moving in. There's some, and that neighbor possibly being a werewolf. Like, let's not hide it, right? Like that's what they lead to almost immediately with him. There is also this sense that like everybody in the town is being really mean to Hubie, and he's out trying to quote unquote protect people. And you know, we all know how movies work, so obviously something's going to happen. We don't know what that is, right? But that's really kind of the lead. That's the only thread that pulls us through this. Is there's this sense that something is going to happen, and there's all of these kind of like red herrings of what they could possibly be. You know, we we also know that like the kids are leaving the house for the night, and we hear that the brother is like planning to sneak out and stuff like that, and we all know that's going to lead to bad things on Halloween night too, right? And then there's the whole fucking aspect where he gets lost in the corn maze for 10 minutes of this movie, and it becomes like fucking Signs. It's like there's a ton of little things going on, and you never quite get a sense of where the movie's going until it gets there, and then suddenly it becomes quite the scary movie. Like, there are some scary moments in this. The moment on the back road with Maya Rudolph and Tim Meadows, where after they've just freaked out Hubie at the drive-in, and they're driving away and they're being assholes, and we just got to see them be assholes. So horror movie logic means they're the next victims, right? Mm-hmm. There's this weird creature in the middle of the road that they stop, and like Tim Meadows gets out of the car and goes up to it, and it was legitimately one of the scariest scenes in a movie I've seen in a while. Like the look of the scarecrow was freaking horrific. Like, it had like human eyeballs. Did you see that?
Yeah, it was terrifying. I don't disagree. It was terrifying. And then I made a Harold joke.
Yeah. And then he like disappears from nowhere, and Maya Rudolph comes up, and all she finds is the toupee and the inhaler on the scarecrow. Yeah. I thought it was going to be his head. I was convinced he was going to come around the corner and he was going to have been decapitated, and that was going to be his head on the scarecrow. And like this movie, it became a thing, right? So people have started disappearing in the town over on Halloween night. And like Hubie, being the hero of the movie, is trying to figure out what's happening. There's this phenomenal turn moment where he ends up in as I said before, this like mystery movie like parlor room where everybody's trying to figure out who did it. And then like there's this realization from everybody that like Hubie, being the dude in town that everybody picks on, being the butt of every joke, like clearly he is a suspect.
He has the motive.
And I'll be honest, I had the exact thought in that moment of like, I mean, why are they not Like clearly Hubie's at the center of all of this. Like, and then they did, and they turn on him, and I was like, oh shit. So like that was actually very good. And then lo and behold, you think it's his love interest, and then it's not her. And then the reveal at the end of this movie that the entire time it has actually been his mother, which is in retrospect obvious, like
super obvious. You have to stand up to bullies, Hubie.
I mean, especially because I'm only realizing this now as we're talking about it, but how much Hitchcock is in this movie. I mean, not just like the filming styles, but also then the reveal of the crazed mother at the end that is going to murder people for her son. Like that's a very Psycho-esque ending, right?
It was very Friday the 13th as well. That was the other thing where like, and we had just had the discussion in this house about how everybody knows that Jason's mother is the killer in the first movie. And then it's revealed and I'm like, yeah, like this makes perfect sense. Kind of makes perfect sense. I wish it weren't June Squibb. I wish it were Kathy Bates because Misery just leads and feeds into it. And June Squibb, I feel like she doesn't get enough except for wearing funny t-shirts that she got at the thrift store.
I think that bit is more than enough for her character because it is because she is a one note character for the first hour of this movie. That
and still June Squibb. It's brilliant.
Like I had it didn't even occur to me that she could have been until like the moment that they reveal that it was somebody that cared about him very much, and I was just like, oh wait, and like I'm trying to think. There was the moment where they talked about her, I think it was her standing on the porch looking out at the burning thing, and she's like, this happens every year. And there was a moment where I was just like, oh, she looks a little angry. Oh, she looks a little angry. And then it was like 2 scenes later that they reveal and it's her. It's amazing. That moment in the house when he walks in and she's just sitting there in the chair. Again, legitimately terrifying stuff.
I mean, June Squibb is part of the funniest joke in this film for me. And that is that everybody who works for the news show dressed as Harley Quinn, and then she's wearing I shaved my balls for this shirt, which is what Renee Montoya wore in Birds of Prey. So, like, I'm like, that was awesome. I hope that it was intended and not just me creating a thread. But it's, like, instantaneous, and I'm like,
I think
perfect.
There's clearly a love of other movies going on right now. I think Harley Quinn being something that's referenced, but there's tons of stuff that goes on in this movie that was just... there's a lot of stuff that reminded me very much of Trick or Treat, you know, like down to
Dale said the same thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of really fantastic like references to things that you don't have to get to enjoy it, but it's great that they're there. Yeah, man, I like so. Because of this, though, right? There's all of this weird shit that you kind of have to kind of give it a pass on, but it's so easy to do that because it is a holiday movie.
Yes,
right.
I mean, that's the only reason we watched it. We were going to watch Hocus Pocus. Dale has returned to work. She started working at Mystic again last week. She came home kind of bummed about the fact that she's working. So instead of watching Hocus Pocus, a movie that Dale has never seen and she's like adamantly against seeing, my mother's like, let's just watch something fun. Why not Hubie Halloween? And this is a movie that the whole family stayed up for. My father usually falls asleep during the movies that we watch on Thursday nights, but that Adam Sandler factor kept him engaged. Yep. And that's the other thing. It's not just that it's a holiday movie, because holiday movies we do naturally give kind of a pass to if it's meandering or like things just happen. But also we give that same pass to Adam Sandler.
Yep.
We understand that like this was just for the joke, and we'll move on as long as it's fun at the end.
Right, to go back to the Sandlerverse stuff, right? Like there's kind of rules that come along with seeing an Adam Sandler movie that we just kind of honestly not just allow to happen, but expect to happen. We almost demand certain things to happen. We want to see Steve Buscemi show up. We want the weird reveal of fucking
Rob
Schneider, right? Like we want these like bizarre like piss jokes and like come out of nowhere, and like we expect to see funny wigs and characters that we know and love with like weird like characteristics to them, almost like a Batman villain in some weird ways, but like Kevin James in the mullet wig the whole time works for me.
Yeah.
Right? Like Especially because they reveal it's the same haircut that he had in high school.
Right. So that makes perfect sense because that's where he peaked. Like, there's a lot of mise en scène on display. And actually, now that we're having this discussion, I'm like 99% convinced that the woman working in the Witch Museum is the same woman who works at the Sturbridge Village-esque place in Billy Madison.
I think you're not wrong.
If pissing your pants is cool, I'm Miles Davis.
But like even Ray Liotta, like we expect to see a I'm not, past his prime is not the right words, but like a tough boy character, like a tough man character actor coming into these roles in Sandler movies and being happy to be like the fool, right? And, like we see that, like we said with Al Pacino, we saw that with Jack Nicholson, and now here we have Ray Liotta. Like these are things that we want out of these movies, right?
I'm a little disappointed that Dan Aykroyd wasn't the mayor. I'm gonna be honest with you. I kept hoping for Dan Aykroyd to show up at some point, even just dressed as a Ghostbuster at one of the party scenes. It would have worked for me. I was disappointed that Dan Aykroyd didn't show up in Hubie Halloween.
I mean, I think we're at a point with Dan Aykroyd where people take him with a grain of salt in a lot of ways. He's a little...
Yeah, no, not wrong, but also still something I was hoping for and expecting when I have all these other people on display.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of movies on display in this film, the mayor is the mayor from Jaws, which I want to speak about the fact that Hollywood is convinced that Massachusetts has the worst fucking mayors. Can I say that for 5 minutes?
You could say that. I'm about to point out to you that art imitates life, but
oh yeah, no, I mean that's gonna be the thing. But I was thinking about it this morning, and the fact that Mayor from Jaws, that takes place in Cape Cod area, right? Martha's Vineyard. Amity is Martha's Vineyard in real life. You look at the mayor in Salem, and then you look at the mayor in Ghostbusters Answer the Call, which is shot in Boston. And should have been set in Boston. I don't know why it's not set in Boston. I mean, they celebrate at the end of the movie at a restaurant that is well known in Boston. They go to a well known Boston theater for the show with the metal band, and the way that Andy Garcia as the mayor acts is so friggin' Mayor from Jaws, to the fact that he's like, don't compare me to the Mayor from Jaws, which would be a bigger kick to someone in Massachusetts than somebody in New York, right? Like it just was so, like it occurred to me this morning that Answer the Call, the plan was to set it in Boston, and then it also makes sense why people wouldn't remember things that happened in the 80s, because they didn't happen here, they happened in New York. And did they really happen? Because fuck New York.
Yeah,
that's how Boston thinks. And I have another thing to talk about, but let's talk about life imitating art and how fucking weird that was. And I don't think I would have noticed it or cared if I hadn't watched Hubie Halloween last week.
Yeah, so whereas in Hubie, we have a lot of people that are, in danger, and Hubie's trying to stop everything, and the mayor's just like, no, we make too much money this time of year.
85% of our tourism dollars come in on Halloween night.
Smell my feet. 85% smell my feet.
Yeah.
Oh shit! But yeah. So you sent me this fucking write up about the mayor from actual Salem, Massachusetts, and how they're basically looking at COVID as like this huge issue. I believe the exact title is a COVID time bomb, and basically them being like, yeah, but we can't afford to shut down.
And the crazy thing is, they've already canceled almost everything that's going on in Salem, Massachusetts. If stores and everything are at 25%, and if you don't have a reservation to go to a restaurant or something, don't go. A big scene in Hubie Halloween is we have kids missing on Halloween night. We need to cancel the fireworks, and the mayor straight up refuses to cancel the fireworks because they're so lucrative for the town. They've already canceled the Salem fireworks in the real world. They're canceled. The Halloween fireworks are canceled, but it's not stopping people from descending like locusts from the Bible on Salem, Massachusetts, because for some reason it's a destination during Halloween.
Yeah. I did love seeing the Salem Witch Museum in the movie, though. Not gonna lie. And the actual Salem Witch Museum, I was like, oh my god, they are actually in that building because I know those like dummies, those fucking mannequins that are getting they're crushed under the rocks. That's John Proctor.
That fountain,
Mm-hmm.
I had a fist fight in that fountain the time I visited Salem in high school. Because I pushed a kid who was taking money out of the fountain into the fountain. He pulled me in, and we had a balls-to-the-wall fist fight.
Oh, man.
And neither of us got in trouble. Field trips were cool.
Yeah. Well, what are they going to do at that point? They couldn't send you home.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, but it was one of those things where, like, and then we laughed about it. We laughed about the fact that we were in a fight in the fountain.
Good times.
Good times. But yeah, it's just really weird to watch this movie that's comparing the mayor to the mayor from Jaws, and then to see that, like, but in the real world, Salem is also kind of experiencing this. Yeah, like, they couldn't have known that when they made Hubie Halloween. That it would be socially relevant.
Yeah, I know. When did they make it, by the way? I was trying to figure out if this was a mid-COVID filming or a pre. It must have been pre.
I have to imagine it was made in 2019, especially since there is that lovely tribute to Cameron Boyce at the end.
Yeah,
and he was signed on to work in it. And also, when Halloween falls on a Friday because the kids are in school. And Halloween was it was a Thursday last year. So it makes sense that it would kind of fall together for them shooting it in 2019. Because Cameron Boyce, by all accounts, was going to be in the film. He had already read the script and signed on before his unfortunate, departure from the mortal plane. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
it's just
trying to be kind about it because it's one of those rare instances where we're talking about some kid that died way too young and not for anything, like for no reason.
Yeah.
Literally, like taken by a seizure. There's no one to blame but the universe, right?
Right. And so it's one of those situations where, like, I have to imagine that it was filmed a year ago with the intent of dropping it on Netflix this year.
Right, holding on into it until Halloween. Yeah.
Like, we'll film it during Halloween, but then we can't release it the same time, and that'll be fine. So I don't know. But also, weird thing about that, talking about things in the real world, the woman who appears as the news anchor recently lost her job because she was in Hubie Halloween. Like, it went against her contract for doing that.
Weird.
So... But, like, did they not know until the movie came out? Like,
maybe they've just been in disputes since then, or maybe she's been acting too big for her britches since then, and they just used it as the reason to get rid of her.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, she's like, I completely understand. Like, she took her lumps. She understood that there'd be consequences. Still was in an Adam Sandler movie. Right, check that one off the bucket list.
And considering how many places, especially in New England, like, I mean, New York, like, you get to be an anchor in New York, you're expected that you're at some point going to show up.
The only reason that I've met Pat Kernan is because he has shown up in the Marvel movies. He's just a news anchor for New York 1. And then he's appeared at, like, shows and stuff because, I was in that Marvel movie because I'm a news anchor in New York and it adds realism to this.
Right. And, people love seeing that stuff. They love seeing their local. I mean, especially because so much of this movie is like a celebration of Salem. It really is.
It really is.
There isn't a scene where they don't mention, hey, we're in Salem, Massachusetts.
They want you to know it. And unfortunately, that could also be another thing tying into the fact that people are descending upon Salem, Massachusetts en masse.
I don't think that.
I doubt that's it. No, I don't think that adds to it. I mean, I've been to Salem, Massachusetts 2 times. That time that I fought in a fountain, and that time I went to Bit Bar. Continue.
Nice. This does lead to my final thoughts on the movie and something that unless from earlier in the episode. So they cannot stop mentioning to you that they are in Salem. They cannot stop mentioning to you that Hubie is a descendant of a woman that tried to stop the Salem witch trials and was then called a witch and then hung, right? And like weird, like in-depth backstory for this character, and one that like very grounded. Like that shit happened. This is not some joke where like this woman I feel like all the time when in Parks and Rec they make jokes about like the history of like witchcraft and here this is like real, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of weird stuff that happens. As I mentioned, June Squibb, mom, ends up becoming the villain of this movie. We learn that she's been the one kidnapping people. She plans to burn people at the stake, does not succeed because Hubie saves the day. All of this, right? And then she pulls a Frankenstein, which we learned earlier in the movie. Hubie also has the ability to do. We'll get into that in a second. But pulling a Frankenstein literally means like, pointing in one direction, screaming Frankenstein, then when everybody looks, you run in the other way, right? Kevin James' best line in the whole movie. I fell for that twice tonight.
He did. He did though.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that happens in the people being kidnapped that really kind of leads to the mystery of it. Mainly what I'm talking about is the fact that people seem to be pulled backwards, and not just like dragged backwards, like literally feet off the floor, and they go flying backwards and like this, like as if there was a rope around their stomach pulled into the darkness, right?
Yeah, it looks as if they're being grabbed by an ethereal force that is taking them away.
Or even in the scene where Tim Meadows and Maya Rudolph, playing the husband and wife, get taken, they just get taken out, right?
Yep.
And all we know is that there's this person, creature, character running around in triangle-eyed mask, easy to assume jack-o'-lantern, right? And then they reveal that it's June Squibb, and my first thought was, now how the hell did she do all of that? And then she pulls the Frankenstein. And then I remembered how much they were really diving into Hubie's background. And so I have to ask, is June Squibb a witch?
No.
In this movie? Is Mom a witch?
No. I can't believe that that's going to be the takeaway. I'd be so upset by that, because everything else in this movie, there's a lot. Like, you believe that Steve Buscemi is a werewolf, and then there's a completely logical explanation for that.
Well, there's as much of a logical explanation as a Sandler movie ever gives for that, yes.
It's my favorite part of the movie. We haven't talked about it, but the fact that Rob Schneider broke out of the mental institution to find his roommate, who earlier broke out of the mental institution and believes that he is a werewolf, that's like the heart of this movie. I don't mean to be a jerk. If you think that there's heart other place, that is where I found heart in this film, and I loved it.
My only issue with that is, and again, totally forgivable, both because of it being a Halloween movie and a Sandler movie, but the idea that it is such a fake out on the audience, it's such a, it almost feels like the movie lies to the audience in order to get that reveal that he broke out of the mental institution too, because we know that one person broke out. The opening scene of this movie is somebody breaking out of a mental institution, right? That's where we get Stiller and all that. And then we get introduced to Steve Buscemi's character, Walter, and we get the impression that he was the one that broke out, right? And then to learn that basically we weren't wrong, right? Because the movie does kind of start to show you slowly that he's not the one that broke out, because we see the guy that broke out from time to time, and then we finally see the two of them meet, and then we learn that they know each other. And that's all great. But then the reveal that it was that he was the one that broke out a month ago, and this one also broke out, and we just had never heard, like not even like a reference, not even a point where like Ben Stiller's like, another one, like nothing like that. That like, they're basically, what that meant was there was no way I was going to figure this out. It's not fair. There were no clue. It's not like watching a good mystery movie where if you watch it a second time, you start to realize where you could have figured it out. There's no way that could be done. And again, totally forgivable because of all of the caveats, as I mentioned, but that did feel a little cheap to me.
So the only reason that it works for me and doesn't bother me is Billy Sherman was someone who was committed because of crimes that he committed in Salem. Walter, I don't remember his real name, was not from Salem. So the only reason that Kevin James is even told that someone escaped from that mental institution is because that person he put into the mental institution.
Yeah, Richie, what's his name?
Richie Sherman.
Richie Sherman.
So it makes sense. Like there's okay, there's a through line there. But also, the second that it's Ben Stiller and his shitty character from Happy Gilmore as the intern at the mental institution, you have to imagine that he's losing people left and right. And he's just keeping it a fucking secret.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I'm totally fine with it, but like there was a moment where that felt a little cheap to me, that reveal, but like totally whatever. It is what it is.
And it worked for me where he's like, we have to talk, and I'm like, oh, so these are the guys. But then the whole, no, they turned himself in. He broke out to try to get him because he had to bring him back to the mental institution. I'm sorry, werewolf treatment facility.
So the only thing I have to say though is the reason why is that knowing that this movie whereas other movies have had guest stars show up, right? And there's this idea that like possibly there's a connected universe there. This one kind of solidifies it, in not least of which the ways in which it basically throws it in your face the whole time. Like we're just bringing the best of Sandler all together, right? If you want to call Little Nicky a greatest hits, this is volume 2. This has to be, right?
I'm sure that Nathan Rabin wrote that in the Providence Journal, if anybody's still subscribed.
So like with that idea, we know that we exist in a world in which the devil is part of it. Magic is a thing. Like we know like bedtime stories introduces the idea of actual magic. Like there is a sense that there could definitely be witches and werewolves in this world, right? So maybe she's not a witch, but does she use magic in order to do these things? Because like
the only reason that it bothers me is because so much of Salem is this fake witchcraft thing. You're not wrong. The second that we put it into this universe, there is a literal superpowered human being in Louisiana in Bobby Boucher. He exists. We know that he exists. And we have all this other stuff. And the devil exists. And I would be completely fine with there being actual supernatural forces at work in this film if, and it's a big old if, everything else wasn't given an explanation.
Right.
It doesn't bother me to think that June Squibb is actually a witch or used witchcraft, and it would also feed into it. But you know what? Be explicit. Show, don't tell. Adam Sandler movie.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is they should have gone whole hog into it. Like give her the moment of saying, you know, they blamed us for being witches before, and so I decided to finally become one. Like something, right? Like give us that, because
give us Harvey Keitel as the devil.
It would definitely tie things together in a way that would have elevated some stuff in this movie for me. Like I said, more than happy to write off the silliness of this film for the fact that it is a Sandler movie and a holiday movie. That was the one thing that I felt like, man, I really wish they had really kind of solidified this for me, because now I'm just like confused. But again, it is what it is. Like it didn't stop me from having a good time with it. It was the one thing in this whole movie where I was like, oh, how does she do these things? And then I realized I had a built-in excuse, but the movie doesn't necessarily give it to me. And so like, I don't feel fair, like putting that on the movie. I don't know.
It's one of those situations where Bring It On, I am 100% convinced that Cliff and Elijah Dushku's character, can't remember her name, really mad at myself for that right now, are the same person. Does not bother me at all to think that script-wise, that is the plan. And it is just Torrance using her own mental gymnastics to come to terms with that. That does not bother me, because there's nothing in Bring It On that disproves that. I haven't fully rewatched the film to confirm that, but based on everything that I remember after watching that film, there's nothing that disproves my belief that they are but one person and Torrance is just doing mental gymnastics to come to terms with her latent homosexuality.
I mean, I'm a firm believer in the fact that there was at least a treatment of the script in which,
where that's the case.
Maybe they don't go so far as to make her imagine another person, but that there was at least a version of that script in which that was the couple, was her and was the two of them.
As Elijah Dushku's character, why don't we remember her name?
Because it was weeks ago at this point, and I'm full on in Hubie at this point. Yeah,
but it's one of those things. But like, there's nothing that disproves it. Everything in Hubie Halloween tells you this can't be the explanation, and all they need to do is just make it the explanation. And even though everything is against it through the whole film, I would be okay with it.
Yeah,
because you see her on a broom flying away or something like that. I don't know. It's just sort of what I would need. It's what I would need to be able to say she was a witch, because I can do the same sort of mental gymnastics that I did with Bring It On to make that a firm belief of my own, right? Yeah. Something that I would go to the mattresses for without any issues. I have quoted The Godfather too many times. Apologies. I'll put $1 in the Godfather jar.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that, like, I will fight for that. I would not lay my life down on the line for June Squibb as a witch in Hubie Halloween, because I just feel like nothing supports it. Nothing in the film supports that being the case. Even him having a magic thermos does not support his mother being an actual factual magic using witch.
We have not talked enough about the magic thermos, by the way. I love it. I love that it does whatever he needs it to do in the moment.
I love that totally it's explained away by him. Like, I made it in 8th grade. It's sort of a Swiss Army thermos.
I made it when I was in the Scouts. I was like, fuck yeah, you did.
Perfect. You loved that as an Eagle Scout.
Yes.
I love bringing up the Yord Eagle Scout. Super fun. We also didn't talk about the American Graffiti reference, which is the Wolfman Jack scene, which is more Wolfman Shack.
And we we gotta leave some surprises for the people at home.
We don't need to do
I feel
any
like
more
people
than
should
that.
see this movie.
Let's
But
watch
the
the
reveal
movie.
of Shaq in this movie is awesome.
It's a great
Another thing that I expect out of a Sandler movie, though, is to see some large athlete of some kind show up in an unexpected role.
Which is sort of how you could fit Uncut Gems into the Sandlerverse.
Oh, God.
Just to be that asshole. But I don't think it fits. I don't think that the Safdie brothers film. I think that the Safdie brothers would be pissed off if people were like, Uncut Gems, that's part of this universe. No, it's not. Thank you.
One last one. I'll save it. It'll be my final thought on the show, I think. Never mind.
Okay, so then I'd like to. I've said sort of everything that I have to say on this. I'd like to address something from last week's episode that ties in with everything. I watched the Jesse crossover Ultimate Spider-Man. Loved it. Big thumbs up. It's Morgana Le Fay, by the way. That's the name of the sorceress.
Morgana, yes.
When you said that, I thought you meant that it was a secondary Disney reference, and they put in Madame Mim from Sword in the Stone.
No.
But it was Morgana Le Fay.
It's Morgana, who is the witch from Merlin and
of the actual stories of
Fist
King
of
Arthur.
Avalon and all that. Yeah.
So that thumbs up. But what that actually brought me to is a season 2 episode called Spider-Man. I don't know how to do a Boston accent. Spider-Man. Spider. There we go. Spider-Man. Have you seen this episode of Ultimate Spider-Man?
No, right now it just sounds like every episode of Ultimate Spider-Man.
Spider-Man? So, yeah, sorry. Yeah. I don't do ours, right? Except for the word room. But I saw it looking for this episode that crossed over with Jesse, which, again, watch it. If you have Disney Plus, it's available. 2 thumbs up. Very good Halloween episode featuring Spider-Man. But if you're from the New England area, which I have to imagine that some of our listening base is, also watch this episode where Spider-Man feels unappreciated by the citizens of New York and goes and becomes the superhero of Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh, God.
And it ties into everything we're talking about because eventually supervillains are created because Spider-Man is there, and one of them is called Salem's Witch. They just lead into it. It's Slam Adams, it's the Plymouth Rock, and it's Salem's Witch.
Man,
it is amazing. So much fun if you're from the Massachusetts, New England area. Watch Spider-Man. I can't do it. I already have it's good. Ultimate Spider-Man, Drake Bell. I think I'm gonna have to sit down and watch the whole series.
I love Drake Bell as Spider-Man. I think it's a phenomenal pull.
But yeah, that's the other thing.
And have no fear, Cameron Boyce did get to have his time with Spider-Man. Not outside of the Jesse episode. He also he shows up as Shock, as what's the character's name?
Shocker.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who he shows up as. So yeah, also if I also had a weird ripple from that conversation from last week, and that I found out that Cameron Boyce had been in other Spider-Man projects.
Fantastic, I love it. So what's your final thought? I'd like to hear your final thought on Hubie Halloween. I've just taken us on a nice detour. Bring us on home.
Oh, I mean my Twitter handle. Final thought.
Oh, what's that? Oh, okay. So if you have nothing else to add before that, if you'd like to talk to us about the Sandlerverse, I think we've put some good, solid rules down as to what counts. Definitely all of the ones where the lady has a double V name, and maybe some other things. Click and 9 Lives. Devin Decker established, same universe. But come fight me about it on Twitter at Devin D. Decker.
And if you want to talk to me about whether or not the trilogy, soon to be quadrilogy of Hotel Transylvania fits in, and meaning that this would not be the first Halloween Sandler movie, then you can hit me up at Siege vs. the World.
Again, if there was magic in Hubie Halloween, I'd have no problem with it. If Buscemi were really a werewolf, I'd have no problem with it.
Which he has played before.
Yeah, this is his fourth time being a werewolf. How? All right, Will. Take us home, please.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.